Good morning everyone, I'm John and this is my other half, Rosanna.
Hello.
And this week we're going to talk about Jonah chapter 3. And we're going to make a start with the very last verse of Jonah chapter 2 that we were looking at last week. And that's the verse where it says, "And the Lord God spoke to the fish, and the fish vomited Jonah out onto the dry land." So here he is, poor old Jonah. He's just spent 3 days and 3 nights inside a big fish where he prayed, as well he might. I mean, I would have prayed if I'd been swallowed by a big fish. Would you, Rosanna?
I definitely would.
And he looks distinctly the worse for wear now, doesn't he? Somewhat dishevelled.
A bit hollow-eyed, I think. Yeah.
Keep that in mind, that might be significant. And what happens next is that God speaks to Jonah, and God says,
"Arise and go to Nineveh,"
exactly.
which is just what God said at the start of chapter 1.
But this time, he went to the right city.
Now Nineveh was quite big. It was 3 days to journey across it. It was bigger than London.
London's only about 40 miles across. But if you started in Aylesbury and journeyed for 3 days, I think it would take you all the way to Dartford.
So after a day journeying, Jonah started to speak.
So that would have been about Rickmansworth.
And what was the prophecy?
Well, he said in a loud voice, "In 40 days' time, all of Nineveh will be destroyed."
Yeah, go on.
Now that's all we've got. So either it was a very short prophecy, or maybe they kind of reduced it down when they wrote the story. But that's what we know he said.
So what happened next?
Well, it seems like right away all the Ninevites responded, and they got dressed up in sackcloth and they declared a fast, from the greatest of them to the least of them.
Wow, well I think Jonah got off quite lightly really, because if you look at some of the Old Testament prophets, well they had to go on for ages before anybody paid attention. The prophet Isaiah, he kept asking people, "Why do you continue to rebel? Have you not known? Have you not heard? Has it not been told to you from the beginning? From of old your ear has not been opened." But Jonah, he just cleared his throat and people were repenting all over the place.
Maybe he still looked a bit scary from earlier on with the fish thing. Or maybe it's what Pete said last week. All these people in Nineveh all worshipped this good God that was half man, half fish. And when somebody showed up who'd spent 3 days inside them, they were quite curious to know what he said. Especially when his God was the God that had created all the fish in the first place.
So word of this all got to the king of Nineveh. And he dressed in sackcloth and sat in ashes, and he issued a decree that everybody shouldn't eat or drink, everybody should fast, even the herds and the flocks. And he also said that everybody should wear sackcloth, including the animals.
So, in case you find that hard to imagine, we're going to recreate it all for you now. And Rosanna has very kindly agreed to be the king. Sackcloth. Okay, now I need herds and flocks.
Sorry?
Herds and flocks, they have to wear sackcloth too, and call out mightily to the Lord.
And where are we going to get herds and flocks from?
Well, as you can imagine, we don't have a cow handy,
We don't.
but our dog, Toffee, has very kindly agreed to impersonate a Highland cow for a few moments. He looks like a Viking.
It's the strangest cow I ever saw.
He is fluffy.
He is.
Ah, ashes. ashes. And the king said a very interesting thing. Go on, king.
Let everyone turn from his evil way and from the violence that is in his hand. Who knows, God may turn and relent and turn from his fierce anger so that we may not perish.
Okay, cow duty over. We don't know whether Jonah mentioned it or not, but the king of Nineveh was obviously conscious that violence might have been the problem, because he speaks about the violence in people's hands. And the interesting thing is, history tells us that violence might very well have been the problem. The Assyrians were the dominant civilization at the time, like the Romans were in Jesus' time, a few hundred years later. And they were famous for being brutal on the battlefield and for destroying and burning cities. They liked to do it. So violence might very well have been one of their big problems. But even so, when God saw that they had turned from their evil, God, in his part, said, okay, I won't destroy you. I won't do any harm.
So I'm just wondering, what's that got to do with us?
Well, one thing it definitely shows is that God is a God of second chances and third chances and fourth chances. So Jonah turned. Jonah had a second chance. And Nineveh, the whole city turned and had a second chance.
So sometimes in relationships it's not possible to try again. Things sometimes have gone too far. But again, God can bring new life out of these situations too. Maybe a change of heart or a new direction.
With God himself, there is always a way back. There is always hope. I think when there's been something around for a while that's not been under control, then that maybe it's in our DNA as human beings that we link survival with doing things differently in the future. And with the news being a bit better with COVID-19, I wonder if that's what's going on with all this very careful thinking that we're doing about racism and about how we treat black and ethnic minorities in this country. And people want to turn, I think, from what's been happening.
And maybe this morning there's something God has shown you that you need to do, but you've not yet done.
Or maybe you feel like you need to say sorry to God. Or maybe you're in a situation that you kind of can't get right, but you feel like you could do with having a refresh this morning to carry on with it. So if perhaps you were in any of those kind of states, then you might like to join with us in this prayer, which we're going to say together now, which is just kind of saying sorry to God.
Father, we have sinned against heaven and against you. We are not worthy to be called your children. We turn to you again. Have mercy on us. Bring us back to yourself as those who once were dead, and now have life through Christ our Lord. Amen.
And finally, maybe later on today, you might want to have a think about a time when things weren't in control, but it did all come out okay in the end. That's the ashes, those.
I haven't released my ashes.
Think about a time when it did come out okay, and just ask yourself what's God saying in that. While I remember. Sorry?